In 1981, a Soviet submarine ran aground inside Swedish territorial waters, less than 10 kilometers from a major naval base. The Swedes boarded it. The Soviets claimed navigational error. Western intelligence later concluded it was almost certainly carrying nuclear warheads. The incident exposed something the public had never fully understood. There were submarines operating inside the territorial waters of nuclear-armed neighbors, routinely, undetected, for decades. And the only reason this one was caught was because its captain made a mistake no other submarine commander had made in 20 years. That is what a submarine hierarchy actually is. Not a list of vessels ranked by size or armament, but a ranking of which navies can find each other and which cannot. Because the entire history of undersea warfare is the history of one question: who saw who first? And at every level of this list, that question is answered by a different combination of engineering, training, doctrine, and money. Let's get into it. Level 1, the diesel-electric patrol boat, the Kilo class in its baseline export configuration, the Type 209 sold to a dozen smaller navies. The Romeo class still operated by North Korea decades after the Soviet Union retired it. These submarines were designed in the 1960s and 1970s, manufactured in significant numbers, and remain the backbone of coastal navies around the world. You do not buy a Level 1 submarine to project power, you buy one to deny it. The mission is simple. Sit on the seabed inside your own territorial waters, listen, and make any approaching surface fleet calculate whether the cost of crossing your coast is worth the risk. The boat runs on batteries when submerged. Range underwater is measured in days, not weeks. To recharge, it must come shallow and run diesel engines using a snorkel, which is the moment any modern maritime patrol aircraft can detect it. That is the structural limitation of Level 1. You are quiet, but you must breathe, and breathing is when you die. The crews who operate these boats are often genuinely capable. They know their patrol box. They know every rock and current on their continental shelf. They are not being asked to engage a U.S. carrier group in the open Pacific. They are being asked to make a neighbor think twice, and that capability is real. It is just not strategic. Level 2, the upgraded diesel-electric. This is the answer to a specific procurement problem. Your patrol boats are 30 years old. A nuclear submarine is politically and financially impossible. And your regional rival has just commissioned something newer. The solution is not a new boat. It is a new propulsion system inside it. Air-independent propulsion, AIP. The Swedish Gotland-class, the German Type 212, the Japanese Soryu class in its earlier configurations. These submarines can remain submerged for 2 to 3 weeks without surfacing because they generate electricity from a fuel cell or a closed-cycle Stirling engine that does not require atmospheric oxygen. That is a transformation. A Level 1 boat must come shallow every few days. A Level 2 boat can sit on the seabed for a fortnight. And during a 2005 NATO exercise off the coast of Florida, a single Swedish Gotland-class submarine operating on lease to the U.S. Navy repeatedly penetrated the screen of a carrier strike group and recorded simulated kills on the USS Ronald Reagan. The Americans extended the lease for 2 more years specifically to understand how it had happened. The answer was uncomfortable. The Gotland was quiet enough and patient enough that the most sophisticated anti-submarine warfare fleet in the world could not reliably find it in its own training waters. Level 2 changed the equation for every navy that thought nuclear was the only path to credibility. Level 3, the first-generation nuclear attack submarine, the American Los Angeles class, the British Trafalgar, the Soviet Victor III. These boats represented something fundamentally different from anything below them on this list. Not a quieter submarine. A submarine that does not need to surface at all. A nuclear reactor produces electricity for as long as the reactor has fuel, which is the entire operational life of the boat. The only constraint on submerged endurance is food for the crew. Range becomes irrelevant. A Los Angeles-class submarine commissioned in the 1980s could leave Norfolk, transit submerged to the North Pacific, conduct a 3-month patrol, and return without ever breaking the surface. That capability is not an upgrade, it is a different category of weapon. The implications were strategic. For the first time in the history of warfare, a vessel could operate continuously inside enemy waters for months at a time, listening, mapping, recording, and if necessary, killing, without ever announcing its presence. The Cold War's most consequential intelligence operations were not flown by U-2s. They were conducted by attack submarines operating inside Soviet territorial waters, tapping undersea communication cables, recording the acoustic signatures of every Soviet submarine leaving port. That archive is the reason the United States Navy can still identify a Russian submarine by sound today. Operation Ivy Bells was not a film, it happened. And Level 3 is what made it possible. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. Stay with it. The next 4 levels are where the architecture stops resembling anything below it. Level 4, the ballistic missile submarine, the Boomer, the Ohio-class, the British Vanguard, the French Triumphant, the Russian Delta IV, and the newer Boré. This is no longer a weapon system in the conventional sense. It is 1/3 of a nuclear deterrent posture, hidden at depth, untraceable for months at a time, carrying enough warheads to end any nation that attempts to use nuclear weapons first. The Ohio-class carries 24 Trident II missiles. Each missile carries up to 8 independently targetable warheads. A single Ohio-class submarine operating in a patrol box somewhere in the Pacific or the Atlantic holds the destructive potential of every conventional bomb dropped in the Second World War, several times over. And nobody knows where it is. That is the design specification, not stealth as a tactical advantage. Stealth as the entire purpose of the platform. The Boomer does not hunt. The Boomer hides. Its mission is to be impossible to find, because if it cannot be found, it cannot be destroyed in a first strike. And if it cannot be destroyed in a first strike, the first strike becomes irrational. The Boomer is the reason no nuclear-armed state has used a nuclear weapon against another nuclear-armed state since 1945. That is not a small claim. It is the founding logic of the post-war strategic order, and it lives inside roughly 40 steel hulls scattered across the world's oceans at any given moment. Level 5. The improved nuclear attack submarine, the Seawolf-class, the Virginia-class, the British Astute, the Russian Yasen. This is where attack submarine doctrine stopped being about anti-submarine warfare and started being about everything at once. The Seawolf-class was designed during the Cold War to hunt the most advanced Soviet submarines in the deepest, coldest, most acoustically difficult environments on the planet. Only 3 were ever completed. Each one reportedly cost over $3 billion. They were too expensive to mass produce, and the Soviet Union collapsed before the requirement justified itself. The Virginia-class is the answer to that problem. Almost as capable, significantly cheaper, designed to do everything an attack submarine is now expected to do. Anti-submarine warfare, land attack with cruise missiles, special forces insertion and extraction, intelligence collection, mine warfare, anti-ship operations. The Virginia is a multi-role platform in a way no previous attack submarine attempted to be. The Russian Yasen-class represents the equivalent design philosophy from the other side. Highly capable, multi-mission, networked into a wider command architecture. Reportedly comparable in acoustic performance to the late Los Angeles-class, though Western assessments vary, and the operational picture remains uncertain. At this level, the submarine is no longer a single instrument. It is a platform that can be reconfigured for whatever mission the strategic situation demands, on the same patrol, sometimes within the same day. Level 6, the next-generation strategic platform, the Columbia-class, the Russian Boré-A. The Chinese type 096. These are the submarines being designed and built right now to replace the boomers that have been on patrol since the 1980s. The Columbia-class, the American successor to the Ohio, is expected to enter service in the early 2030s. Each boat is projected to cost over $9 billion. The program total is estimated above $120 billion over the life of the fleet. That is not a procurement budget. That is a generational commitment to the survival of the strategic deterrent. The defining engineering challenge of Level 6 is not firepower. It is silence. Every component on the submarine is being designed to reduce acoustic signature below detectable thresholds. Electric drive systems replace mechanical reduction gears that produced detectable harmonics. The reactor is designed for a full 42-year service life with no refueling. The hull is acoustically optimized in ways the Ohio-class was never engineered for because in 1980, the technology to do so did not exist. Why does this matter? Because the entire deterrent depends on the boomer being undetectable. And the technology used to detect submarines, low-frequency sonar arrays, satellite-based ocean surveillance, autonomous underwater vehicles, machine learning applied to acoustic data, has advanced by orders of magnitude since the Ohio was launched. A boomer that was undetectable in 1985 may not be undetectable in 2035. Level 6 is the response to that problem, decades before the problem becomes operational. And the entire credibility of the deterrent depends on getting it right. Level 7, the networked undersea node. Picture this: a crew of around 130 officers and enlisted is operating a nuclear-powered submarine somewhere in the Western Pacific. They are not hunting, they are coordinating. 200 kilometers to their north, an extra-large unmanned undersea vehicle is conducting a passive surveillance patrol along a contested shipping lane, transmitting acoustic data back to the manned platform through a low probability of intercept undersea communication network. 300 kilometers to their east, a swarm of smaller autonomous vehicles is mapping a section of the seabed that has not been surveyed in years, looking for anomalies that might indicate a minefield, a cable tap, or another submarine resting on the bottom. Above them, a high-altitude unmanned aircraft is providing a synthesized picture of every surface vessel within a 1,000-kilometer radius, fused with the manned submarine's own sensor data. The crew has not surfaced in 2 months. They have not transmitted in 72 hours. And they are simultaneously aware of more activity across more domains than any submarine crew in history. This is the U.S. Navy's evolving concept of integrated undersea operations. The Orca X LUUV program, the development of large unmanned undersea vehicles intended to operate alongside manned platforms. The classified work on undersea communication networks that allow a manned boat to act as the command node for a constellation of unmanned systems operating across hundreds of kilometers of ocean. The cost of this architecture cannot be reduced to a per-vessel figure. The vessel is no longer the unit of capability. The architecture is. And the architecture is being built in classified programs whose budgets are absorbed across multiple line items in multiple defense appropriations year after year, deliberately. At level 7, the submarine is not a weapon, it is a presence. Every previous level was defined by what the boat itself could do. Level 7 is defined by what the boat enables across an entire underwater theater. The crew at level 7 is not a submarine crew in the traditional sense. They are a command element operating inside the most protected piece of real estate on the planet, which is the deep ocean, and from there, they command everything else. The diesel boat sitting on the seabed off a coastline in 1965 and the networked undersea node operating off a contested coastline in 2030 are solving the same problem. Who saw who first? The distance between them, measured in cost and capability, is the entire story of post-war naval power. If this was useful, subscribe. See you in the next one.